And welcome back to RGR Football. We have to have Matt Derrick on. We're contractually obligated to give you somebody that knows something. So how are you, Matt? You're our guy.
I don't. Once again, I don't know if this is rush or anything, but I'm just glad that you're contractually obligated to have me here.
I'm going to rely on that forever because people are like, all you do is give opinion. Yep, I just give opinion. He's the journalist, not me. So, the perspective honestly really changes things. And this last week, we heard from Brett Veach. It was nice to see him. Got words from him. How did you feel about the whole thing? Was it enlightening or was it, okay, we'll wait and see?
Yes, some of it's a wait and see. I think you saw the probably rosy, optimistic state of the union of the Chiefs from Brett Veach for this time of year, which that's nothing out of the ordinary. Yeah. Probably he's a little bit more optimistic, maybe on the injury fronts, which we can certainly get into. But I thought there was a little bit of insight as far as where they are roster building wise and heading into the draft and free agency. I think there was some frankness as far as the acknowledging that this isn't going to be one of those seasons where they're going to be able to go out and spend willy-nilly and spend too freely, that they're going to have to be a little bit more frugal this time around. That probably means waiting to see where the market sits on a few things. Maybe that means just waiting out the market to see if there's some bargains that they can pick up along the way. They're going to have some draft slot picks that, they can certainly fill some spots and everything. So if by the end of the free agency, if they don't feel like they've accomplished what they need to, they can fill some needs there. He certainly touched on some elements of the draft that he thinks that there's some depth, with the wide receiver, offensive lines, defensive lines, a corner, where I wouldn't be surprised if they addressed all those needs. I think one thing that popped out to me, I don't know about everybody else, but the fact he's talking about tight end, I feel like they're talking about that more seriously this year. And certainly some of their actions as far as, the draft guys that we know that they've already contacted, certainly seems like that's a position that they're looking at. And I would be, at this point, pretty surprised if they don't come out of this draft with a tight end too.
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised by that one as well. It's a nice development that when we don't hear about it at all during the offseason, maybe it's a lark when you take somebody, but that feels more pronounced that this is a goal.
Hey, the moment that Brett Veach said, hey, don't expect us to go out and spend a lot of money on a wide receiver in the first week of free agency, I immediately thought, oh my goodness, he's going to go out and spend a lot of money on a receiver in the first week of free agency. That's what you expect when you get the smoke screens from the GMs. It's like, okay, he's telling us the exact opposite of what he's going to do, but I'm still not expecting him to do that.
I know somewhere in the back alleys of NFL headquarters, there's the GM training consult. This is how you throw people. Like, I need that for my day life. I need to be able to just obfuscate everything. I'm really interested to see what happens with that one. But I thought also the bigger takeaway for me was how I felt that he kind of keyed you into just how off guard they were about the offensive line, not just with Fish getting hurt the game before the Super Bowl. That's obviously a road bump that is impossible to foresee. But specifically, when he went all the way back to camp and finding out that LDT was not going to be available, and then Yang, who I think they were trying to project as a guy that could slide into that guard spot, even though he really should be a tackle, then you lose him like that. I think that set up the whole season that maybe there was more concern there from the get-go than we ever knew.
Yeah, I think that there was all along, and I think that was the first indication I think that we got that at least, maybe it's 2020 hindsight completely, but that was the first indication that we got that there was any acknowledgement in the organization. It was like, you know what? Hey, Eric Fisher's the final straw. I mean, that was it. Because, and I, talking to some of the guys, the limited amount we were able to do this year, it wasn't necessarily a rally around kind of a thing, but, there was a certain amount of pride that group took, that they were able to persevere and they were able to keep going. And it was just one too many. I mean, and in retrospect for me, I certainly look back at it now and I'm like, I don't know how we should have expected that offensive line to be able to compete in the Super Bowl, because they're going up against the Bucs and they don't have their two biggest dogs, and certainly the one big dog that they had to have. So I think that they realized that they got as much out of that group. They squeezed every ounce that they could out of that group, and it just wasn't enough at the end because they had too many losses. Yeah, I mean, maybe it's a little bit of excuses, after the fact, because every team gets some setbacks. But we talked about it all season. I mean, that was just one position group where from May on, the losses just kept on coming. I mean, between just the opt-outs and the injuries throughout the season, they just seemed to never catch a break.
Yeah, it was a tough one. And maybe I read too much into, I thought Wiley's performance against Jordan, against New Orleans, was a precedent setter. And maybe I overread that as well, because clearly, while Brett Veach did mention him this week, along with Allegretti, so I think that those two guys definitely have made their impact this season as much as any. Maybe that was just overreaching at that part to really think that the sum of the whole was going to overtake those two pillars that you had to have. That said, I don't think it changes anything with the draft philosophy. Do you?
No, I don't. I mean, if anything, it's made me think maybe a little bit differently about the calculus about how they're going to go about things. I certainly expect them to address the offensive line, draft, and free agency. Mm-hmm. I don't see them going into the season without adding another veteran tackle onto the squad. I think they're going to address tackle in the draft too, even though they did it last year with Lucas Niang. I wouldn't be surprised if they drafted, that same approach, but if for no other reason than, from Andy Reid, Brett Veach, Andy Heck, they love tackles. So even if they want to draft some guy to play inside, they're usually going to look at guys who played some tackle before.
Yeah.
So would not surprise me in the least, but they've got to face the fact that if they're not going to play with Fisher and Schwartz this year, chances that they're going to do it in 22 and certainly 23 are astronomical. Mm-hmm. So they need those replacements to be on the roster this year. And so maybe Niang's one, maybe he's not. But they also just need insurance for this year too, because I think that even if you are as optimistic as you can be about Lucas Niang, do you see the guy that they could plug in to play left tackle in the postseason? Right now, the guy's not there.
Nope. Yeah, I think overall they realize that they have to raise the level of their backups across the board in case something happens. And who knows, we might even see opt-outs again. We don't know what's going to happen with the virus and everything else. So that brings me to the other side of the ball. I think another way to forego some of those risks is by extending some players that you feel you want to have long-term. And I know someone brought it up about Tyrann Mathieu, and I think that that's important. I expect to see that here in the next couple of weeks. Is that still on your radar?
Yeah, I mean, that to me seems like the number one thing that they want to get accomplished right now. It would certainly help them to get that accomplished sooner than later, because you get Tyrann Mathieu's extension done, it frees you up and gives you some leverage with some other things that they can do contract-wise if they need to create some more cap space. Remember, we still don't know exactly where the cap's going to come out right now. So how much room that they need to create for mid-March, which is, it's coming right around the corner. We really don't know how much they need to have at this point, but Mathieu can get you a big chunk there. And it's not even just solely about creating cap space for 21. It's that they want this guy to be the face of their defense for a few more seasons. So yeah, they would like to get that done. Last year, the extensions didn't get done until the summer. And that's when they got everybody done. Kelce, Mahomes, Jones. I don't think it's going to be that way with Mathieu. I think they want to get that one done sooner than later. And there's some indications that, that some work has already been in the progress on that. I think they'd like to get it done pretty quickly, but it's the NFL. You never know with contracts.
Yeah, there's always a sticking point, but let's cross our fingers. It seems like that. It's also a position that I think maybe they can bolster through free agency. That's one of the things that I think the value around the league. I think there's going to be some more releases. I think there's a decent group of free agents at safety right now. Are you still leaning towards Sorensen returning, or do you think that they might shop elsewhere and really change the dynamic with that trio?
Yeah, I mean, I could see them still looking, because that position is so important to what Steve Spagnuolo does defensively. And I think it's just going to, continue to be that important, if not increase importance going forward. Especially just in, we talked about it around the league. I mean, you're playing with more 5 and 6 defensive back looks, and the Chiefs would like to be able to have those extra defensive backs be flexible guys, people who can play a little corner and safety and move around a little bit. So I think they would be looking for that. Sorensen really, I mean, he fits what they do. They love him. So, and special teams wise too is a big part. I don't think that's a bad, a hard contract to get done. So I think he would be back, but I don't think that necessarily precludes them looking around and seeing if there's anybody else that they think they can bring in there.
Yeah, this is one where I think you can raise the overall level of your roster looking at upgrading backups. And obviously there's big holes you have to fill, but beyond that, just in generalities. And that brings me back to philosophical changes. I think we discussed that last week, that there are possibilities there. I don't really foresee that happening, but the bigger thing to me is that the integration between the coaching staff and the front office, especially as we're approaching free agency and they're going to get things done, but then they really have to focus on the draft, and the pro day schedule is starting and it's so important this year. I'm really interested to see when they announce coaching hires for 2 opportunities now, right? Likely one on defense. We don't know if it'll be another outside backer kind of spot or just a general backfill. But certainly the running back coach has got to be important for Clyde's development and moving forward, right?
Yeah, I mean that's definitely going to be an interesting hire. That's the most profile one that they've got out there, and no indication yet that person's on the staff right now. It's a person that may move into that position. It could be maybe for somebody else in the organization, but they went outside last time when they brought in Dylan McCullough, so I would think that that's probably the direction they'll go again. Yeah, that's a big position, and it's certainly one that you want that person that you come in to be somebody that Clyde's comfortable with. So, I think that's one that clearly they've been taking there's some time with. So we'll see how they end up filling that spot. And you're right. They've got a position, probably on defense that they could put that spot, but it's flexible. So they really could, use that defensive spot in a lot of different places. They could be bringing somebody to work with linebackers, could be defensive line. That's a big group that Brendan Daly's been working with. He's got really one of the biggest position groups as far as by himself. Yeah. Because remember you got 2 secondaries coaches, so Daly's got basically 10 guys with him and no assistant. So he could probably use some help up there. But they've got some flexibility, so it'll be interesting to see where they go with that too. But yeah, to me, that running back one is actually going to be a pretty big, important spot to fill.
Just size-wise, I know that like the new age, the younger coaches seem to be expanding more and more in the number of coaches that they put on staff. Do you see Reid doing that, or you think that they stay pretty bare bones like they are now?
It's interesting because, the one thing that, with Andy's staff is that, there's some guys that are kind of, behind the scenes kind of guys that play really important roles. I mean, the Joe Blameyers of the world that, get mentioned at times in press conferences, but I don't think a lot of, teams know. I mean, these are guys that, do a lot of the film work. They're doing some of the analytics stuff. They're almost as important pieces of the coaching staff as the guys on the field. And that's something that Andy's kind of expanded a little bit. I mean, they have. I mean, that's where they have been putting some resources. So to me, that's the interesting thing. I mean, is to see if that's, kind of those other assistants and those analyst positions that they could fill. And, Andy's also not afraid to bring in, some veterans that he's worked with in the past and some of his friends into some of those analyst positions too. So I'd be interested to see if there's anybody coming back to the staff or anybody that Andy Reid's worked with in the past that might be an important voice to add to this team.
Yeah. I feel like there's a couple of big announcements coming. I just don't know if it's going to be pre-free agency or not. So thank you for all of your time, enlightening us to where they are, at least right now. It'll change tomorrow, but thanks, Matt.
Absolutely, Ryan. Always great talking to you.
Folks, we'll have more for you, and we'll drop Matt in whenever something big happens, and you know that it will, about as soon as I plan a vacation. So, hey, thanks. And we will talk to you next time.
Thanks for watching this video from the team at RGR Football. Click these videos to see more, and subscribe to RGR Football.